Most people would have kept the money and walked away. Those words would later follow Emily Johnson everywhere. But on that rainy afternoon, she had no idea her life was about to change. The sky above Portland was dark and heavy with clouds as Emily hurried across a crowded downtown plaza after finishing a long shift at a neighborhood grocery store. At 34 years old, she had learned how to move quickly through life. As a single mother raising her 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, every minute mattered. Every dollar mattered even more. The rent was due in 6 days. Her car needed repairs. The refrigerator held just enough groceries to last through the weekend. Yet despite all of that, Emily continued forward with the same determination she carried every day. Rain began falling harder as she crossed the plaza and noticed something unusual near a bench beside a fountain. At first, she assumed it was an abandoned briefcase. People rushed past without paying attention, eager to escape the weather. Emily almost kept walking as well. Then something made her stop. The black leather case looked expensive, and it seemed strangely out of place. She glanced around. No one appeared to be searching for it. Curious, she stepped closer and carefully picked it up. The case was heavier than expected. Her heart began beating faster. She hesitated for a moment before opening it slightly. The instant she saw what was inside, she froze. Bundles of cash filled the entire case. Neatly stacked bills sat in organized rows. Emily immediately closed it and looked around again. Her pulse raced. She had never seen that much money in her life. For a brief second, dozens of thoughts flooded her mind. The overdue bills. Sophie's school expenses. The repairs her car desperately needed. The constant financial pressure that followed her every day. Anyone would have understood the temptation. Yet another thought arrived almost immediately. This money belonged to someone. Somewhere, another person was probably panicking after realizing it was gone. Emily took a deep breath and tightened her grip on the handle. She knew exactly what she needed to do. Across the street, inside the back seat of a luxury sedan waiting at a traffic light, billionaire entrepreneur Michael Reynolds happened to witness the entire scene. He had been returning from a meeting when the woman near the fountain caught his attention. At first, he paid little notice. Then he saw her discover the briefcase. He watched her reaction carefully. Even from a distance, he could tell she had found something valuable. What happened next surprised him. Rather than walking away, the woman immediately headed toward a nearby security office located beside the plaza entrance. Michael leaned forward slightly, his curiosity growing. Most people would not have made that choice so quickly, especially not someone whose worn jacket and tired expression suggested life was far from easy. Rain continued falling as Emily entered the security office carrying the briefcase. She had no idea a stranger was watching. She had no idea that her simple decision was about to capture the attention of one of the wealthiest men in the city. And she certainly had no idea that before the day was over, Michael Reynolds would become determined to learn exactly who she was and why she had chosen honesty when keeping the money could have solved so many of her problems. Inside the security office, Emily carefully placed the briefcase on the counter and explained where she had found it. The officer on duty opened the case, and his eyes widened immediately. He quickly called a supervisor while Emily stood quietly near the door, dripping rainwater onto the floor. Within minutes, several employees were verifying the contents and making phone calls. Emily could sense the growing urgency in the room. One of the supervisors approached her and thanked her repeatedly for bringing the money in. He asked for her contact information in case additional questions arose. Emily filled out a simple form and handed it back without hesitation. To her, the situation was straightforward. She had found something that did not belong to her and returned it. Once the paperwork was completed, she stepped back into the rain and continued toward the bus stop. Across the street, Michael Reynolds remained seated inside his car. He watched her leave the building and expected to see some sign of excitement or regret. Instead, she simply adjusted the strap of her worn purse and hurried toward public transportation as though nothing remarkable had happened. Michael found that unusual. Most people would have lingered. Some might have asked whether there would be a reward. Others might have spoken proudly about their honesty. This woman did none of those things. She simply returned to her normal life. As the traffic light changed, Michael made a decision he rarely made. "Follow that bus," he told his driver. The request surprised the driver, but he nodded and complied. Michael was not interested in invading anyone's privacy. He simply wanted answers. Something about the woman's behavior felt genuine in a way he rarely encountered. As the bus moved through several neighborhoods, Michael observed from a distance. Eventually, Emily exited near a modest apartment complex on the east side of the city. The buildings were older but well-maintained. Children played beneath covered walkways, while parents carried groceries through the drizzle. Michael remained inside the vehicle as he watched Emily climb a set of stairs and disappear behind an apartment door. A few moments later, the curtains shifted slightly. Through the window, he saw a young girl run into Emily's arms. The woman immediately knelt down and hugged her tightly. Michael looked away, unexpectedly affected by the simple scene. He suddenly realized that the woman who had returned $50,000 was not someone living a comfortable life. She appeared to be a mother doing her best to hold everything together. Back inside the apartment, Emily greeted her daughter Sophie and helped her finish homework at the kitchen table. The apartment was small but clean. Family photos decorated the walls. A handwritten calendar tracked bills, school activities, and work schedules. As Sophie talked excitedly about her day, Emily smiled and listened carefully, hiding the financial worries that occupied her thoughts. The rent was still due. The car still needed repairs. None of those problems had disappeared, yet she felt peace knowing she had made the right choice. Later that evening, after Sophie went to bed, Emily sat alone by the window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. She wondered whether the owner of the briefcase had been found. Hopefully, whoever lost the money would be relieved. Meanwhile, several miles away, Michael sat in his penthouse office, unable to stop thinking about the woman he had followed home. The more he reflected on what he had seen, the more curious he became. For the first time in years, a complete stranger had captured his attention not because of ambition, influence, or wealth, but because of a simple act of honesty that seemed to reveal something much deeper about her character. The following morning, Emily woke before sunrise as she always did. She prepared breakfast for Sophie, packed a lunch for school, and reviewed the small notebook where she tracked every household expense. The numbers did not leave much room for error. After paying rent, utilities, and groceries, very little remained. Yet despite the pressure, she refused to complain. Sophie deserved a childhood filled with encouragement rather than worry. After dropping her daughter at school, Emily headed to the grocery store where she worked. The shift was long and busy. Customers moved steadily through the checkout lanes, and Emily spent hours helping shoppers, answering questions, and restocking shelves whenever needed. Most people who saw her would never guess what had happened the previous day. To them, she was simply a hard-working employee doing her job. Meanwhile, across the city, Michael Reynolds sat in a conference room surrounded by executives discussing investments worth millions of dollars. Normally, his focus never drifted during meetings. Today was different. Several times, his thoughts returned to the woman who had returned $50,000 without hesitation. Finally, after the meeting ended, he made a phone call to the security office near the plaza. Without revealing his personal interest, he asked whether the owner of the missing briefcase had been located. The answer surprised him. The briefcase belonged to an elderly business owner who had accidentally left it behind while rushing to an appointment. According to the security staff, the man had been overwhelmed with relief when the money was returned. More importantly, they mentioned that the woman who found it had declined any reward. Michael sat silently after ending the call. She had refused a reward. That detail affected him more than he expected. Later that afternoon, Emily received a call during her lunch break. The security office wanted to thank her once again and inform her that the owner of the money was deeply grateful. They also mentioned that he wished to offer compensation. Emily listened politely before declining. She explained that she had only done what she believed was right. After ending the call, she returned to work without discussing it with anyone. For her, the matter was closed. That evening, as Emily walked home carrying a small bag of discounted groceries, she noticed a local community center preparing for a weekend fundraiser. Volunteers were arranging tables and decorations. Without being asked, she stopped and spent 20 minutes helping them move supplies indoors before continuing home. The gesture seemed insignificant to her, but someone happened to witness it. Michael had been driving through the neighborhood after a nearby meeting. Once again, he saw the same woman helping others without expecting anything in return. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Back at her apartment, Emily and Sophie shared dinner while talking about school, books, and weekend plans. Laughter filled the small kitchen. Watching her daughter smile made every sacrifice worthwhile. As night settled over the city, Emily felt tired but content. She believed no one beyond her family had noticed her choices. She could not have been more mistaken. In his penthouse office, Michael stood by the window overlooking the city lights. The more he learned about Emily Johnson, the more convinced he became that she was unlike anyone he had met in years. And for reasons he could not fully explain, he decided that their paths needed to cross again, this time not as strangers separated by distance, but face to face. 2 days later, an unexpected opportunity arrived. Emily was working a late afternoon shift when her manager informed the staff that a local business networking event would be held at a nearby hotel. Several employees had been invited to help with food service and guest assistance. The extra hours came with additional pay, so Emily immediately volunteered. Any chance to earn a little more money was worth considering. That evening, after arranging for a neighbor to watch Sophie for a few hours, Emily arrived at the hotel ballroom. The event attracted entrepreneurs, investors, and community leaders from across the city. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the room, and conversations echoed between elegantly dressed guests. Emily felt slightly out of place but focused on her responsibilities. She greeted attendees, directed them toward registration tables, and helped coordinate refreshments. Her professionalism quickly earned appreciation from both guests and organizers. Several hours into the event, Michael Reynolds entered the ballroom. The moment he stepped inside, he noticed Emily. For a brief second, he wondered whether the encounter was simply coincidence. Then he smiled to himself. Life sometimes had a way of creating opportunities that no amount of planning could produce. Throughout the evening, he observed her from a respectful distance. Just as before, Emily treated everyone with the same kindness regardless of status. She spoke to executives and maintenance staff with equal courtesy. She thanked servers who assisted her and patiently helped elderly guests find their seats. Nothing about her behavior appeared calculated. It was simply who she was. Near the end of the event, an elderly woman attending alone seemed confused while searching for transportation home. Several people walked past without noticing. Emily immediately approached and offered assistance. She spent nearly 15 minutes helping the woman contact a family member and ensuring she would get home safely. Michael witnessed the entire interaction. Once again, Emily expected nothing in return. As the ballroom gradually emptied, Michael realized that if he continued observing from a distance, he would never receive the answers he sought. For the first time since seeing her in the rain, he decided to introduce himself. Emily was organizing materials near a registration table when she noticed a well-dressed man approaching. She recognized him instantly from newspaper articles and local business interviews. Michael Reynolds was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the state. Emily straightened slightly, surprised by his presence. Michael offered a warm smile and introduced himself. To his relief, Emily appeared comfortable rather than intimidated. Their conversation began with simple topics related to the event. Michael thanked her for helping the elderly guest earlier. Emily shrugged modestly and said anyone would have done the same. Michael knew that was not true. They spoke for only a few minutes, yet the exchange felt remarkably natural. Emily was intelligent, thoughtful, and sincere. There was no attempt to impress him. She seemed unaware of how rare that quality had become in his world. Eventually, the event concluded, and Emily prepared to leave. Before walking away, Michael thanked her again for her work and wished her a safe trip home. Emily smiled politely and headed toward the parking area. As she drove away, she assumed she would probably never see him again. Meanwhile, Michael remained standing near the hotel entrance watching the taillights disappear into the night. For the first time since this unusual journey began, they were no longer strangers. And although neither of them realized it yet, that brief conversation had quietly set something important in motion. The days following the networking event passed quietly, yet neither Emily nor Michael completely forgot their conversation. Emily returned to her normal routine. Every morning began before sunrise, and every evening ended with preparing meals, helping Sophie with homework, and carefully planning how to stretch each paycheck as far as possible. Life remained demanding, but she had learned long ago that worrying rarely solved anything. Instead, she focused on the next task, the next responsibility, and the next opportunity to move forward. One Wednesday afternoon, Emily received unexpected news. The grocery store where she worked announced that several positions would be eliminated due to budget reductions. Employees gathered in silence as management explained the changes. Although no final decisions had been made, uncertainty immediately spread throughout the staff. Emily listened carefully, her heart growing heavier with each passing minute. Losing her job would create serious problems. She depended on every hour she worked. Still, she remained calm. Panic would not help her daughter. Panic would not pay the bills. After the meeting ended, she quietly returned to work and completed her shift. That evening, she chose not to tell Sophie about the situation. Her daughter deserved a peaceful evening, not adult worries. Instead, they shared dinner, talked about school projects, and spent time reading together before bedtime. Once Sophie was asleep, Emily opened her notebook and reviewed every household expense again. If necessary, she would find a second job. She would adjust. She always did. Across town, Michael attended a charity board meeting. During a discussion about workforce development programs, he found himself thinking about Emily. For reasons he could not fully explain, he remained curious about her life. Not in a superficial way, but in the sense that he genuinely respected the values she seemed to live by. Later that evening, while reviewing community partnership reports, he noticed that the grocery chain employing Emily had recently announced staffing reductions. The information immediately caught his attention. He remembered where she worked from their conversation at the hotel. Michael leaned back in his chair. The possibility that she might soon face additional hardship troubled him more than expected. The following weekend, another unexpected encounter occurred. Emily had volunteered to help at a neighborhood food drive organized by the community center. She spent the morning distributing supplies, organizing donations, and helping families carry groceries to their vehicles. The work was tiring but rewarding. Around noon, a familiar voice greeted one of the organizers nearby. Emily turned and saw Michael walking toward the event. He had arrived as a donor and sponsor for several local programs. Their eyes met, and both smiled with genuine surprise. Unlike the formal atmosphere of the hotel event, this setting felt more relaxed. They spoke while helping sort donation boxes and distribute supplies. Michael was impressed by how naturally Emily connected with people. Children approached her comfortably. Elderly residents greeted her by name. Volunteers clearly respected her. During one conversation, Michael casually asked how work was going. Emily hesitated briefly before mentioning the possible layoffs. She did not complain or ask for help. She simply stated the facts. Michael listened carefully. The more she spoke, the more he admired her ability to face uncertainty without bitterness. As the event came to an end, they found themselves talking longer than either had planned. For the first time, their conversation extended beyond polite introductions and surface-level topics. And as Michael watched Emily laugh at something Sophie said while helping clean up the final tables, he realized that his growing admiration had become something far more personal than simple curiosity. Monday morning arrived with gray clouds hanging low, and Emily walked to the bus stop with her daughter Sophie holding tightly to her hand, rain lightly misting their jackets. The previous weekend had left her mind spinning with thoughts of layoffs and uncertainty, yet she moved forward methodically, checking her watch to ensure they would not miss the bus. The streets were quiet, most people preferring to stay indoors, which made the rhythmic sound of raindrops on umbrellas feel almost like a private accompaniment to her thoughts. At the bus stop, she noticed an envelope lying on the wet concrete, corners damp from the drizzle. Kneeling, she picked it up and realized it contained a significant amount of cash, enough to cover several months of rent and bills. Her heart raced as she considered the implications. Returning it to its rightful owner seemed the only moral course, but she hesitated for a moment, aware of the strain her finances were under. With a deep breath, she decided honesty mattered more than convenience. After boarding the bus and sitting with Sophie, she glanced out the window, thinking about where the money might have come from and who might be worried already. Meanwhile, Michael, reviewing his company schedule from his penthouse office, received a call from a concerned employee reporting a missing envelope of cash from a recent business transaction. His assistant provided details and a rough estimate of its contents. Michael's mind immediately connected dots. Earlier, he had noticed Emily's demeanor at the food drive and remembered her integrity and calm intelligence. The coincidence felt almost serendipitous, and he felt compelled to check in, not just as a businessman, but as someone genuinely curious about how this situation would unfold. Emily, arriving at the cafe where she worked her shift, carefully handed the envelope to the manager with a short explanation, who nodded appreciatively and promised to investigate. The act felt heavier than the physical weight of the envelope. It symbolized responsibility, courage, and the quiet dignity she carried through every challenge. That afternoon, Michael drove to the cafe, parking discreetly a block away, observing as Emily left the building after her shift. He noticed her interaction with a regular customer, how naturally she smiled and engaged, and how children nearby seemed drawn to her warmth. He admired her from a respectful distance, recognizing in that moment that the simple act of returning money revealed not just honesty, but a character shaped by resilience, empathy, and unwavering principles. Emily, unaware she was being watched, walked home thoughtfully, contemplating bills and upcoming school activities, grateful that despite challenges, moments of integrity and kindness still guided her decisions. Michael followed cautiously, wanting to ensure the envelope had reached the right hands, yet also wanting to understand more about the woman whose quiet strength had clearly captured his attention. As they both continued through the drizzle, the city felt suspended in a calm tension, each step forward carrying not just movement, but the unfolding promise of connection and the weight of moral choices respected and observed by those who understood their value. Emily returned home that evening, rain still dripping from her coat, her mind racing with the day's events and the weight of doing the right thing despite her own financial worries, yet she felt a quiet pride in her choices. Sophie ran ahead to the small apartment, chattering about school and homework, oblivious to the tension that had filled her mother's day, and Emily followed with a thoughtful smile, reminding herself that small acts of integrity often ripple farther than anticipated. Meanwhile, Michael, back in his sleek black car, watched from a discreet distance as she approached her door, noting the subtle grace in her movements and the careful attention she paid to Sophie, an unmistakable reflection of her dedication and resilience. He had driven past once or twice before, each time observing quietly, resisting the urge to intrude, yet compelled by curiosity and a growing admiration that went beyond simple recognition of her honesty with the returned envelope of cash. He realized he wanted to understand the person behind those small, courageous decisions, the woman who balanced strength and humility with such natural ease. Emily, unaware of his presence, unpacked groceries and prepared a modest dinner, juggling household chores and Sophie's questions, creating an atmosphere of normalcy that masked the internal calculations she made to ensure bills were covered and needs met, a delicate dance she performed daily. Michael made a decision to approach carefully, waiting for the moment when she would be outside again, perhaps checking the mailbox or stepping onto the fire escape for fresh air, and when the opportunity arose, he introduced himself politely, expressing appreciation for her integrity and the way she handled a difficult situation, emphasizing that his intentions were respectful and genuine, and that he wanted to learn more about her story. Emily, initially cautious, listened as he spoke, noting the sincerity in his tone and the lack of expectation beyond conversation, her guard softening as she recognized that this encounter, though unexpected, was rooted in respect and acknowledgement rather than judgment. They talked briefly on the small sidewalk, exchanging smiles and polite conversation, the city around them bustling with evening activity. Yet in that moment, the world seemed to narrow to the honest words shared and the mutual recognition of character, each understanding the significance of integrity, observation, and subtle connection. Michael offered a gesture of kindness, suggesting a way to help with resources for her family or small opportunities for Sophie, framing it as an extension of respect rather than charity, and Emily accepted, grateful for the thoughtfulness and the absence of any presumption, noting how rare such authentic gestures were in her daily life. By the time they parted for the evening, both carried a sense of anticipation, each reflecting on the unexpected bonds formed through simple acts of honesty, the quiet power of integrity, and the unfolding potential for trust and deeper understanding in the days to come, a narrative of human decency quietly shaping paths and hearts alike in ways neither could have predicted, yet both appreciated fully. Over the next several weeks, a quiet friendship began to form between Emily and Michael. Neither rushed the process. Their conversations remained simple and genuine, built on mutual respect rather than expectations. Michael occasionally stopped by community events where Emily volunteered, and sometimes they met for coffee while Sophie attended after-school activities nearby. What surprised Emily most was how comfortable she felt around him. Despite his wealth and success, Michael listened far more than he spoke. He asked questions about her experiences, her goals, and the challenges of raising a child alone. More importantly, he remembered the answers. One afternoon, Emily received the news she had been dreading. The grocery store officially announced staff reductions, and her position was among those being eliminated. Although she had prepared herself for the possibility, hearing the words still felt like a punch to the stomach. She thanked her manager for the opportunity, collected her belongings, and walked out of the building carrying a small box. As she reached the parking lot, she sat inside her aging car for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel while trying to gather her thoughts. Her first concern was not herself. It was Sophie. School supplies, rent, groceries, and countless other responsibilities immediately filled her mind. Yet even then, she refused to feel sorry for herself. She had faced difficult situations before and found a way through them. This would be no different. That evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Emily updated her resume and began searching for opportunities online. Unknown to her, Michael learned about the layoff the following day through a mutual contact. He was concerned but careful. The last thing he wanted was for Emily to feel as though he viewed her as someone needing rescue. He respected her independence too much for that. Instead of offering direct financial help, he spent time considering a different approach. A week later, Michael invited Emily to lunch under the pretense of discussing a community project. During their conversation, he mentioned that one of his companies was expanding a customer relations division and seeking someone with strong communication skills and community experience. He explained the role objectively and encouraged her to apply if she was interested. Emily appreciated the suggestion but immediately made one thing clear. If she applied, she wanted to earn the position through the same process as everyone else. Michael smiled and assured her that was exactly what he expected. Several days later, Emily submitted her application. The interviews were challenging and thorough. Multiple managers evaluated candidates independently, and Michael intentionally removed himself from the decision-making process. He wanted the outcome to be based entirely on merit. When the final results arrived, the decision was unanimous. Emily was selected because of her professionalism, work ethic, and ability to connect with people. The news brought tears to her eyes. The position offered better pay, stronger benefits, and opportunities for advancement she had never imagined possible. That evening, she celebrated with Sophie over pizza and ice cream in their small apartment. As they laughed together, Emily felt something she had not experienced in a long time. Security, hope, possibility. Meanwhile, Michael sat alone in his office looking out across the city skyline. He felt proud of her achievement because it belonged entirely to her. She had earned every step forward. And as he reflected on the remarkable chain of events that began with a briefcase full of cash beside a fountain, he realized that the greatest discovery had never been the money itself. It had been the extraordinary character of the woman who chose honesty when no one was watching. Nearly a year after the rainy afternoon that changed everything, Emily stood beside Sophie at a community celebration held in a downtown park. The event recognized volunteers, local leaders, and residents who had made meaningful contributions to the city. Children ran across the grass, live music played softly in the background, and families gathered beneath clear blue skies. Looking around, Emily could hardly believe how much her life had changed. Her new position had provided stability she once thought impossible. Bills were no longer a constant source of fear. Sophie was thriving in school, surrounded by opportunities Emily had worked so hard to create. Yet despite the improvements, she remained the same person she had always been. She still volunteered whenever she could. She still believed that integrity mattered even when nobody was paying attention. And she still measured success not by money, but by the ability to care for the people she loved. As the afternoon continued, one of the event organizers stepped onto the stage and announced a special recognition award for outstanding community character. Emily listened politely, expecting to applaud someone else. Then she heard her own name. For a moment, she stood completely still. The crowd erupted into applause as Sophie grabbed her hand excitedly. Surprised and slightly overwhelmed, Emily made her way to the stage. The organizer explained that numerous community members had submitted stories describing her volunteer work, kindness, and unwavering commitment to helping others. There was no mention of the briefcase or the $50,000. Most people did not even know that story. Instead, the recognition reflected hundreds of small choices she had made over the years. Choices to help neighbors, support local programs, and treat people with respect regardless of circumstances. Emily accepted the award with humility, thanking the community and emphasizing that kindness belonged to everyone, not just a single person. Standing near the front of the audience, Michael watched with quiet pride. He knew better than anyone that the award represented exactly who Emily was. After the ceremony ended, families gathered throughout the park. Sophie proudly carried her mother's plaque while introducing her to anyone willing to listen. The sight made Emily laugh. A short time later, she and Michael found themselves walking along a tree-lined path away from the crowd. Neither felt the need to fill every moment with conversation. Their friendship had grown steadily over the past year, built on honesty, trust, and mutual admiration. Eventually, Michael broke the silence. He admitted that he had never told her the full reason he first became interested in her story. Emily smiled and told him she already knew it involved the money. Michael nodded and explained that what stayed with him was not the amount she returned. It was the fact that she chose honesty during a moment when keeping the money would have been understandable. Emily looked ahead thoughtfully before responding. She explained that her daughter was always watching. Every decision she made taught Sophie something about the kind of person she should become. For Emily, that mattered more than any amount of money. Michael smiled, realizing that answer perfectly reflected everything he had learned about her. As the sun began to set over the park, Sophie ran toward them carrying 2 ice cream cones and laughing uncontrollably about something that had happened near the playground. Emily and Michael exchanged amused glances before joining her. Together, they walked back toward the celebration, surrounded by music, families, and the warmth of a future filled with possibility. And as Emily looked at her daughter and the people beside her, she understood a simple truth. The greatest rewards in life often begin with a single honest choice made when nobody is watching.